Hi, and welcome to Worried About Nothing. Today we're going to talk about letting go and what it means, how we do it, whether we can actually let it go, or we're just thinking that we're letting something go. And we'll also share our personal experiences. My name is Katya,
And I'm Kim.
And I'm Danielle.
and welcome.
It's a funny one, letting go, because sometimes depending on the perspective of the viewpoint, it can be one of the most difficult things to do or one of the easiest things to do. So I find with me, when I'm trying to let go of something that I've been carrying around for a long time, my mind will tell me that it's incredibly difficult and it's going to be strenuous and effortful and it's going to take so much energy and it's going to change my life in a awkward way or whatever it might be. And then I find often when I let go of it, it's the easiest thing, because it's like, instead of carrying around this huge, great big rock all the time, you just put it down and suddenly you're so much lighter. So it's kind of effortless. But the mind will sometimes tell you that it's complicated or convoluted or difficult or it needs to take time or you have to build up to it or whatever it is, all these stories that can come up. But really, letting go is just that, is letting go. It's kind of, you let gravity do its job. You don't have to do anything apart from just open your arms sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess a question that comes to mind for me is if you could describe what that internal process is like for you, because there's a step right between that holding on and then when you finally actually get to let go. So can you say anything to that?
I guess the first thing is seeing it. Sometimes it takes a long time to see that you're holding on to something, or for me, it takes a long time for me to see that I'm holding on to something. And there can sometimes be stages, in that if I persuade myself that I'm letting go, but I'm actually just mentally pretending to let go, I can kind of go through the whole mental process of, oh yeah, I've let that go. Oh, I feel so much better. Oh yeah, that's great. But I'm still thinking about it all the time. Why is that? And then the sort of difference between actually letting go, for me, often there's a bit of an aha moment or a realization or just a kind of like a breath of, oh my God, what am I doing? Or why have I been carrying this? Or a real clarity around, this is completely insane. The things that my mind is telling me is true. And then the letting go part is just, well, I don't have to do that. So why am I doing that? Okay, let's stop doing that. And it just kind of, it's like it slides away or it just falls away. So there's not really a conscious or active doing. It's more of a stopping, a clenching, if that makes sense.
It does. Thank you.
No problem.
For me, I find that usually I'm more ready if it's something big. Usually it has been going on for a while. I have been thinking about it. I've been doing everything to just untangle and don't worry about it and stop thinking about it. But if it's just keep progressing and I just find myself in a lot of suffering in a way that my mind is constantly going around the hole, just keep thinking and digging more and find the solutions and trying to fix it and think, what if I do that? What if I do that? And it's just not working because you just keep thinking about it. You can't be present. You can't go through your day. You're constantly in your mind looking at that issue. And the mind comes up with thousands of ways. I was like, okay, if this way doesn't work, what if I do that? Okay, that doesn't work. Okay, how about I try this? And there's just so many solutions. I just need to try them all in my head. And then at some point, I was like, no, I can't handle this. It's way too much. And usually I go into Tantra process. By Tantra, I mean, I just go so deep in it because I just can't let it go. I just go into full suffering in a way that I was like, well, I'm here. I might as well just just go and suffer. And eventually it just goes away. And because it's so deep, I'm in the process like a baby, whatever, even if it's sometimes it even involves screaming, or it didn't happen very often, but I remember twice I just had to scream or cry or just shout or do whatever I needed to do. And eventually it just goes by itself, because I just get to the point I was like, okay, that's it, I don't care. I'm done, I don't care. And at that point, when you stop caring, you feel that it's actually gone and you really don't care about it. And it is light, as you described. You're fresh again. And I was like, oh, wow, you can breathe now. That's the process for me, usually.
Yeah. And I sometimes find that it can happen in stages. So, particularly like if it's something big, like you said, sometimes I don't find myself letting go of it all at once, but it can happen incrementally. So it's almost like the first letting go is like a door opening to the fact that it's something that I'm holding on to that I don't need to. And then in stages, I can feel it slipping away. Sometimes over minutes or hours or days, or sometimes even weeks. Like it gets deeper and deeper, and sometimes I don't even notice it if I'm not really paying attention, if it's a long process, until maybe months later, and I'll kind of go, oh wow, that's completely gone. And it just slipped away because it happened over such a period of time. But then there are times, like you described, Katya, when it's such a big thing and you're so into it and it's consuming your life and your mind is just running around in circles and trying to make sense of it and trying to, work it all out. Where Tantra is the way, as you say, where you just have to go so deep into it that you feel like you're dying sometimes. And I guess in a way you kind of are. And then you get to that point of, sometimes for me, it's a point of laughing because I'm suffering so much and I'm having this massive tantrum. And then I see myself really clearly and I point and I laugh and I think, you're such an idiot. What the hell is happening here? Why are you kicking up such a massive fuss over something that you think is so real, but it isn't? It's not real at all. And sometimes with that moment of clarity, then it just slips away, because being able to see it for what it is, which is just a toddler tantrum over the fact that I wanted a blue toy train instead of a green one or whatever it is. Sometimes that perspective or that clarity can really help it shift too. Or sometimes you just have to go through it and suffer and come out the other side and go, wow, that was a huge expenditure of energy.
Right. You just have to be like, wow, that was really pointless. Hopefully I don't do that again. Hopefully I learned my lesson. No, that's totally true. And thank you for bringing up like the flip side of that, because getting that perspective sometimes of just saying like it's not real, or having some sort of space to be able to let it go, just isn't there. And it, for whatever reason, get really stuck in trying to figure something out. There's something here I can figure out. And then going into the suffering, because I had a recent experience of that, just trying everything that I could do to stop thinking about it, still in my mind, can't get away from it, and then just go through the suffering of it. I do think sometimes you have to just burn off the suffering, and maybe that's the way that issue had to be dealt with. But at other times, I definitely think that it's like, looking back on it, you look at it and you're like, what was I doing? I didn't need to expend nearly as much energy. I could have just sat back a little bit more, taken a breath and reassessed things, and maybe not have freaked out quite as much as I did. Internally. This is not like external stuff. It's the going arounds in the mind for me. But
I agree with you that sometimes you really have to go through that emotion of suffering, because in many cases I'm actually aware that what's happening. In many cases, the awareness came before the suffering, and I was trying to do everything. I was aware what's happening, but it just wouldn't leave me. And at that point, I was like, no, this is not real. But it would still consume me. It would still consume, and until I actually go through that emotion, it would go away. And at the moment when I'm going through the tantrum, I'm aware that I'm doing it. I was like, yeah, I know I'm doing it, but I guess I must. I guess I have to do it. So well, not always, but usually the awareness is there. But yeah, as you say, Danielle, it needs to happen.
Sometimes I guess it depends on how close it is to you. You know, the way that some suffering or some things that you let go of are almost distant, so you can see them completely objectively, nearly. And some things are so close because they're such key or core issues, or they hit something that's so painful, that's unacknowledged or raw or whatever it might be. And in that situation, sometimes I find that what I think I'm trying to let go of is not actually what I need to let go of. So I might be trying to let go of the story around it. So let's say I have an issue with being overlooked or something, but I'm telling myself that I'm fine. I've grown out that story. It's, no longer an issue for me. And then somebody does something or triggers something that really hits that core issue. But because I'm pretending to myself that issue is not an issue, I go, oh, it's because I hate rudeness. People are rude to me. I really hate it. I've got an issue with that. I need to let go of that, and so I won't be letting go of it because I'm not looking at what really is the issue. I might be looking at something that I've told myself is the acceptable issue. That's a bad example, I know, with being overlooked, but, sometimes there are really core things that come up in childhood that we've pushed down so deep that we don't even want to acknowledge that they might possibly exist. It's those things that are really hard to let go of, I find.
Yeah, I think that's a great example. I thought that was an excellent example.
Okay.
But please continue.
But yeah, something that really touches that kind of absolute sense of self, because sometimes it's like that sort of building blocks. If you're letting go of stuff that's up the top, it's quite easy, it just falls off. But if you're letting go of one of the foundation stones, the whole kind of wall of bricks has to come down as well. So it's a big letting go. So that can sometimes be more difficult to do. And also, I think things that are like that, the core issues that in some ways define our stories about ourselves, the things that we're attached to, so I find with me sometimes, like sometimes the victim story can come up with me quite strongly, or has done in my life. So I'd kind of go into this pained victim mode of, oh my God, the world's against me. Everyone's out to get me. It's just so horrible out there, And I could see at the same time, not always, but sometimes, that I was really enjoying being a victim so much. I really did not in the slightest want to let go of that story, because it defined who my sense of self was, and it defined, in some ways, my place in the world, in inverted commas. So that can be one of the things with letting go of big stuff as well, is that you have to want to, not just mentally or not just in that moment go, oh no, I'm done with this. Sometimes it has to be a real, oh yeah, I'm really absolutely done with this.
Mm-hmm.
I'm done with this hamster wheel of running around, repeating the same things over and over and over and over again. And when those things are let go of, then that can kind of throw your life upside down, because you're turning everything inside out. But it can be scary as well, because it's a big thing. But when that happens, that's when the biggest sense of kind of, oh my God, the freedom, the feeling of freedom, when you let go of such a heavy, heavy, heavy burden.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. It can be scary though. I agree with that, especially if it's a story that's been with you for like your whole life or lifetimes, let's say. And it's like, well, what is my life going to look like without that? How do I navigate certain situations? Because I know for myself, I have a lot of story about relationships. And I think about it, I'm like, if I didn't have these stories about it, I don't know how I would act in relationships. Would my life be reckless in some way? some sort of danger, would occur. There's this fear around. I just don't know who I would be without feeling this way or experiencing these things. It would be a completely different experience for me. And that's kind of scary. I imagine it would be a lot better, but it doesn't stop it from being scary.
But that can sometimes in itself be one of the scariest parts of it. That knowledge that, yeah, life would be so much better without this story. That can be terrifying, because first of all, you have to look at the fact that you've been carrying it around for so long, and you've been the one that's been ruining your life in a way, you know. And sometimes something being better can be, it's like we were talking about a few podcasts ago about, you know, the analogy of Plato in the cave, the kind of what's familiar, what you see, what you know is trusted, it's comfortable, it's, you know, where the boundaries are. But if you change your perspective or look another way and step out of the cave and suddenly everything's much better and everything's different, that can be terrifying because it's all unknown. And also there's the aspect of, oh my God, this was happening the whole time when I was stuck in my cave. Oh my God. And it's taken me X number of years to step out. You know, all of that can kick in, and it's, I guess it could be really overwhelming at times.
Yeah, that's a really good point too. Because I know, at least for me, when I see a big pattern or I notice that I've been doing something, then it's sometimes like that shame reaction will kick in. And then it's just like, oh my God, that overwhelming, like, I can't believe that I've been doing this for so long. It's like you almost don't even want to look at it because of the shame that it brings up. Like, I can't believe I've been doing this. So yeah, it's really interesting. The other thing I was thinking, though, like you said, I'm like, well, is this the real issue? Because I've worked on relationships a long time. So I was like, maybe there's a bigger like cornerstone under here that it's not the true issue, that it needs to be released, that maybe there's something else. So we'll see. I'll let you guys know if I find out.
But you know what? You can be easily tricked in a way that if you haven't fully worked through the issue, and it just, as I think, as Kim said, it comes in stages. Because I had that before. I thought, okay, I think I'll let go of this issue. I've done everything I could. I think that's it. I think I'm fine. But then it keeps coming back. And I think there is, as Kim said, it could come back at a different point where you thought you're done with it. And then again, it becomes so real. So maybe you haven't fully, I don't really know, but I know it was the case for me that I thought I'm done with it, I worked through it, but apparently I didn't, because at some point it comes back and hits me even stronger. And possibly, you know, and I'm back in suffering. I was like, what's up with that? I thought I'm done with that.
Yeah. Yep. I've had that happen too. In this instance, working with relationship stuff, I was like, yeah, I'm finally past it. It feels awesome. This is so great. And then out of nowhere, it's like I had a situation come up and I'm like, wow. I was like, I feel like I'm exactly where I was, like dealing with relationships like 15, 10, 15 years ago. I was like, I feel like the same person. It's so weird how it could just put you back into feeling like, I don't know, for me, it's like feeling like a younger person because it's such a familiar old story. It's like, wow, I do this all the time. Have I not grown up at all? Have I not learned anything in my, however many years since I started noticing that this is something that occurs within me? It just gives you that kind of feeling, or at least for me. And that's part of like the shame, right? It's like you see it and you're like, I'm still doing it. Why am I still doing this?
But sometimes it brings a different angle, right? The second time the third time it comes in, there is something else attached to it.
It is different. I was able to see a little bit of something else. I was thinking like, I think it's something about being heard or being taken seriously. Ooh. That hit something, putting it that way. Because I remember being as a kid, I was always very serious. Like, I don't know, I just wasn't like a playful child. And I think it really bothered me when adults wouldn't take me seriously. You know how like you'll see adults talk to children? I'm not into that because when I was a kid, I didn't like that. Oh, what are you doing? Oh, yeah, you're playing with that? I was like, why are you talking to me like that? So I find it hard to do that kind of thing with kids because I remember what it was like for me.
Well, there's many books written how good it is to talk on child language. I don't do that either. I just talk to them as I talk to an adult.
Yeah, I probably would have appreciated that.
I think another thing, an aspect of letting go, I think, especially when something comes up often over and over, like you mentioned, Danielle, the shame that comes up. I think sometimes with the letting go process, we can stop at that stage. So if we have a realization and we go, oh my God, I'm now seeing clearly what I've been doing, and the shame comes up, we can be so ashamed of the shame that we push it down, so then we stop the letting go process. Whereas if you kind of, I mean, I've only recently been doing this, I pushed it down all my life almost, but recently, as the shame is coming up, when I'm realizing things or seeing things, just being with that shame till it's overwhelming, because shame is such a strong emotion, and you feel so shamed and embarrassed and humiliated and all of these things, and you just own it and sit with it. There's that switch that happens suddenly, that the shame suddenly becomes incredibly beautiful, and it becomes part of you, and it's like you're reunited with a part of yourself you've been rejecting and pushing away and denying. And it's like you are coming back together as one. And then as the shame kind of does that and merges back with you, it's like you feel more powerful and you feel more unified, and the issue, whatever it was, flips, your perspective of it flips, and you can see it for what it is rather than what it was through the goggles of shame. And you can let it go so easily then, because it's like, well, there's no attachment, there's no emotion now attached to that. So I can just see it and go, okay, so for 40 whatever years, I've been carrying that one around and don't need to anymore. And it can be a beautiful feeling of kind of unity somehow. So maybe that's the stage sometimes that can stop the actual letting go, you know, the kind of the big release at the end, or I find in my experience it has been. Because I've been so good all my life at pushing everything down, way down, not feeling it, not acknowledging it. And now, because as things are moving through, that seems to be the process that is most organic and most natural for me. It just feels great, actually.
Beautiful. Actually, shame, I remember when I was a young kid, maybe I was about 10 years old, and I could feel in the morning, it would relate it to the story that happened with my parents and something when I was younger, and I would wake up and I would feel that shame. It was so uncomfortable. I was like, where is this feeling coming from? I don't want to feel this. I literally don't. What can I do to stop it? It was so uncomfortable. And I remember there was years passing by, and from time to time I would feel the shame. And I hate it so much. But I guess I had to feel it. Even though at that time I was pushing it away, I guess there was a point where I was like, okay, it's here. Okay, it's unpleasant. Okay, I think I can handle it. And now I remember there was a few times I was like, where's that shame experience? I don't remember it's coming back.
You like had a memory of having it, but you noticed it's not there anymore.
Exactly.
Really, whatever happened to that? It's like thinking about someone you went to high school with. Whatever happened to that person? I don't know.
But that was, I guess, one of the experiences I had as a child, and had to go through it and feel it.
Yeah, I
Really
think
feel
that's a good point too, because what I've noticed a lot for myself is like it's all past stuff. It's never really for me anything that's happening in the moment. And it's not necessarily being triggered by anything. It's just stuff that's floating around in there still that's left over. Because I'll notice when I'm just working, like my job, I'm just on the computer. I don't really interact with anyone all day. So nothing's happening really in the moment to bring things up. But I notice all of these things moving through me, like just annoyance and whatever. And I know it's not truly my job, because there are days where I do my job and I'm not annoyed. So right, it's not the job then. It's just it's really interesting. I'm like, wow, there's so much junk just floating around in the background that I held on to at some point. And it's funny because it can really, really get in the way of experiencing like what's going on in the moment, because it's I don't know, it's so weird. It's almost like you're watching a movie in your head while you're trying to interact with what's going on around you. So it's like, even if I'm at dinner, like with my family, but if I'm preoccupied, even on any level, with something else, some story that's running in the background, it's like trying to do two things that need your attention at once. It's just amazing that I can get anything done in that state. You know? How am I paying attention to anything? They let me drive. Like, you know?
I guess you can. I'm speaking for myself. You know, I can expend a lot of energy trying to push against something sometimes. You know, so one of the things that's been moving through recently over the last few weeks is anger. So when I was a kid, I used to bottle things up. So I wouldn't really express anger or anything, but it would sometimes burst out because it has to come out. And so I used to get very scared of my anger because it was almost like it was uncontrollable. It would just burst out and boom, I'd punch someone or I'd scream at someone or whatever it might be. So growing up, I'd always had this fear that, oh my God, my rage is a terrifying thing. You know, if I'm angry, I can really hurt people. And it's only in the last few weeks that I've just been really sitting with it and kind of, like we were speaking about, having the tantric process with it. So there's still anger. I think anger is part of, it's that Kali thing, I guess, part of me, or the reaction, you know, towards whatever it might be, injustice or whatever. But instead of feeling that fear of it and that pushing away and spending time and energy trying to control it or direct it, I'm just allowing it to be. And because of that, it's much purer now. And there's no fear of it anymore. And the fear was the part that was the destructive aspect. So it was the not wanting it to be part of me and the fear of what it would do. And all of these stories and layers I was putting on top of it were the things that were destructive, because it was like it was a stream that I was muddying with loads of crap, you know. And whereas now, I mean, I'm not all the way there, but more so, if I feel that anger, I just let it burn through, and it's like a clean fire now, and it will do what it does, because there isn't the story, there isn't the trying to control it, there isn't trying to put it in the box or push against it or deny the fact that I feel anger or any of those things. And now it feels like we were talking about earlier about the shame. It feels like part of me. So the anger is just part of this aspect of, you know, Kimness, you know, and it takes away the fear, it takes away the heaviness and all the kind of the mind junk, the thinking about it, because there isn't any around it anymore. Now it's just a kind of, if anger moves through. I might see why, or I might acknowledge why. Sometimes I don't. And that's fine. And then it's gone, you know, rather than me going, oh my God, I was so angry, and why? And let me build a story about this, and it means this, and it must be added to the story from childhood when I did this and all this stuff. Now it's just, boom, gone through. And it's much easier.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting when you said about control, how you really try to push it away or control it and not want to experience it. Because you don't want it to be part of you. And partially it's programming. You shouldn't be angry, or you shouldn't have these emotions, and you should only be nice and this and that. So I think a lot of that programming is there too.
Yeah, I think it's about embracing all aspects of you, the unpleasant in inverted commas or the bad in inverted commas. You know, I think that's where your power lies, you know, because once you start accepting all things about yourself that you might not even like, or you might have been programmed to see as unpleasant or wrong or whatever it is, there's more and more freedom in that, because you start embracing it, you start loving it, and then you start seeing it for what it is, which is not right or wrong. It's just is. It's part of you. It's who you are. So I'm not the person that when I was younger I thought I was or should be or any of those things, but I like myself a lot more now than I did back then, and that's important, I think.
Makes the life so much easier.
Yeah. So I guess that's another part of letting go. You know, you let go of the things that you think you need to let go of, you know, and just embrace them instead.
Yeah.
I suppose that's really, because letting go in its terminology is letting go of something, whereas I guess the more real way of terming it would be to embrace it, to accept it. So instead of rejecting a part of yourself, you embrace it. And as you embrace it, it becomes one with you, and then it's no longer exists as a separate entity.
Makes sense, especially when I was fighting, when I started meditating with my body and just accepting that my body wasn't sitting still or whatever was happening, just letting it be. That was the challenging, because you have the idea that, going back to the meditation topic, that you have to be still or you shouldn't be thinking. And the moment you let it be and allow it and still have your second attention, keep in the right place, then you just let it happen and eventually it moves through.
That's a great point, though, also putting it as it being a separate entity than yourself. Like, we don't want to split things off of ourselves. So putting it in that way I feel like is a great way to get perspective when you're dealing with something. So it's like pushing it away. Well, then you're kind of like splitting that off and creating an entity in and of itself. And I don't think that's not what we're looking to do, right? So it's really helpful to have it in those words. It maybe gain perspective in those times where it's tough. It's like, well, I don't want to, have this separate entity running around kind of inside of me that I've, forgot I've split off. So maybe better to integrate it. Just be with it now and accept it instead of chopping it off.
And by accepting it, you see it, or in my experience, you end up seeing it in a different way. And things that I've, let's say, spent a lifetime trying to reject or push away because they were very unattractive or unappealing, I suddenly am seeing as kind of endearing or quirky or just silly or something that's more innocuous or even pleasant, because I've let go of that huge pushback against it.
Yeah, the letting go of judgment is what I've been finding more and more, is that it tends to be less about the story in a lot of cases, or the emotion itself, but the judgment that comes up around having it. So like the judgment around feeling shame, or the judgment around being angry, at least for what we consider negative emotions, it's the judgment that comes up around having them that I find is more important to, for me at least, release the judgment of it, so I can just accept that, yeah, I get angry sometimes. Or sometimes I feel sad. Sometimes things feel like they hurt,
Yeah, it's hard to let go of the judgment. Sometimes when I say let go, another word that comes up is surrender. Because people say, and I used to say, what is surrender? But surrender is really like what's recently happened in my situation. I was like, well, this is meant to be like that. I know I might not like it. I want to change it. I want it to be different. But at the end of the day, who am I to say if there is a greater plan? Who am I to say that I want it different? At the end of the day, maybe that's how it's supposed to be. And just accepting it as is a surrender.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect other word. Surrender is a better word for it, definitely. Because it's the letting go of control and the letting go of trying to manipulate and trying to force and all those sharp kind of heavy energies. Surrender is just so open and fluid and free again, because you're acknowledging that you're not the boss of everything, and life is life and things happen. And there's a real beauty in it as well. And I think it's, as we were talking in the last podcast about seeing beauty in everything, seeing beauty in the inverted commas negative, in the traits that we have that we might not like, or the circumstances that happen to us that we might not wish for, but seeing the beauty in that because there is beauty in it, so there can be beauty in sadness, there can be beauty in anger, there can be beauty in feeling things, because you're feeling things. It's almost like a confirmation that you're alive. You're in it, you're experiencing life. And surrender to just allowing life to move through you is just the perfect state. Not that I'm saying that I'm in that state all the time, but when it happens, it's just, that that's what it's about. You're in flow. And then again, it's like I was saying at the beginning, when the mind kicks in and all the stories come up and the resistance comes up and I fight it, with the surrender, again, it's just the easiest thing to do, because it's going back to that natural state of being. Instead of climbing up a stream, it's just flowing downhill with it.
I know that when I can't get to that state of just letting go, like I'll just start asking questions sometimes, I'll say, can please, show this to me in another way? Like I'm not getting it, whatever situation it's in. If I can't get perspective, I'll try different things, kind of like Katya alluded to earlier, trying different things to just get to see it to move. That's one of the things I'll try. I'm like, okay, can you show this to me in a different way? Because I'm not getting what you're telling me. It's like either too overwhelming in the moment or whatever it is. But I was like, I don't think I'm learning what you're asking me to learn. please show this to me differently.
But it's hard to see clearly, especially if it's something that's emotional, because when you're feeling emotional about stuff, almost by definition, you're not seeing clearly because you're not objective, because the emotions are so overwhelming. So it's hard. It's really hard if you're really in it.
Yeah, the emotions can be overwhelming. I sometimes find that we're so programmed that if you're crying, then you really must be sad or something bad must have happened. But I had a few cases where I was crying from happiness. And my husband would come, why are you crying? What's happening? Oh, my kids was like, Mom, why are you crying? But I'm just so happy, that so overwhelmed with happiness that the tears just flow. I was like, Mama is happy. And you can see even confusion with kids, because usually they cry when they hit each other or they fall or something happens or they want something their way. So it's kind of interesting to see that it could be positive reaction, I guess, if you looked at positive and negative. And that's not the reaction of people, because we're so programmed that something bad must have happened. So that was kind of interesting to see. I guess it goes back to the point of embracing the emotion.
And that can be so beautiful as well, though, when you cry because something's so beautiful or something so amazing, or you're so overwhelmed with love, or, it's like I always notice at the retreats, Katya, that when you're around Jason and Aratima, you just cry, and it's just so beautiful, because it's like tears just fall because you're so full of love, or you're so happy, and it's just, because tears are just an expression as well, aren't they? And it's just what we've put on them that has the meaning, because sometimes I've had experiences where I've cried and laughed at the same time, or when you have two emotions happening, you're sad and happy, or angry and delighted, and your body doesn't know what to do, and your face is kind of like crying and laughing and doing all the sorts of things at the same time.
That's when probably people would label you crazy.
Embrace the crazy.
Yeah, I remember crying. I guess it was neutrally, like I don't remember really being sad or anything at one of the retreats. And then someone got up and handed me a tissue, or like tried to give me one. And I was like, what are you doing? Like, because in my mind, I was like, nothing, there was no need for that, I guess. I don't know. I just thought it was funny. And I was just kind of like taken aback by the offer of like a tissue. I'm like, what do I need this for? Didn't even cross my mind, because it wasn't like a sobbing, you see people really upset and they start to get all, kind of liquefied all over the place. It was just like, no, just tears, whatever had just happened. I don't even remember now, had, I guess, moved me in some way to tears. I don't remember it being a happy thing or something truly sad, but I just found the whole situation kind of odd because I was accepting my experience, and then someone, I guess, felt the need to assist in my experience. I'm like, oh, okay.
But people can do that, I think, because it's with the crying, especially people, it kind of kicks in people's need to nurture or help or whatever, or be something. You know, I remember at the first retreat, Katya, when you were crying. I'm sorry to keep bringing up the fact that you were crying.
I guess I'm a crying queen now.
Be proud of the crying. But you were sitting next to me and you cried. And I didn't think, or I just kind of got up and I gave you a hug. And I didn't think anything of it, in that I wasn't aware of my programming because I was not thinking about the fact there was or anything like that, you know. But Jason obviously was there and obviously saw straight through it. So he said, "Oh, and so you fixed her now, have you?" I was like, "Oh God, oh wow, I had not thought of it in that way, but wow, you know." He saw straight through to the motivation, which was, "Oh, I must look after you, I must fix you," you know. And I think that can kick in sometimes because people get uncomfortable with expressions of emotion, and especially tears, I think. Yeah, that was a lesson that I will remember forever, I think.
Well, it's a good nod also to how unconscious the programming can be again, right? Because you're like, oh, you said you didn't even think about why you were doing it. It wasn't like, oh, I'm gonna console her because she needs it. No conscious thought. You just got up and did it. Yeah.
But it's always that gift of being able to dig deeper, you know, for somebody to point something like that out so you can see your own programming and go, oh my God, yeah. And now I'm more aware of it. So if I see somebody crying and if there's an impulse to hug them, I'll always stop myself and kind of just sit with it for a second, just to see where it's coming from, you know, because it can be a very needy thing, you know, the needy on the part of the comforter. Whereas, you know, instead of the person, if the person says crying and they are genuinely upset and they want a hug, sometimes it can be really selfish to hug them because it's for you, not them. You know, and like in some ways at the last retreat, for example, when everyone was lovely and they gathered around, they were hugging me. Most people were hugging me out of a genuine love and all of that support. But there was one or two people that I noticed were hugging me for themselves. And I found that really uncomfortable in that time of me feeling very raw and very emotional, to have this person come in going, right, I'm going to sort you out. This is about me, you know. It was like, okay, you do that, but not on me. You know? I don't think they were aware of it necessarily, but
But it's good that you were aware of that. It's good that you were aware of motivation of other people. I think that's important to be clear about it. Because sometimes I don't notice that. I can feel something unpleasant or something uncomfortable, but I wouldn't even know why it is unpleasant, uncomfortable. So it's good that you can recognize that.
Yeah, it was funny. It was all very clear. And I remember one point I looked at Aratima, and she had tears in her eyes as I was crying, and that was just so beautiful. And that she wasn't crying for me or with me. It was just her eyes were crying. You know, in that it was just a heart reaction. And there was nothing coming from her. There was no, you know, energy or any motivation or anything. But it was just, I remember looking over and just feeling so moved by the fact that she was crying with me because I was crying. You know, it was something very beautiful about that.
Yeah, it was funny for that experience for me because I was like, just not in the same place. I felt like where everybody else was. Everyone's like, okay, yeah, like. I found myself kind of being like, why are we doing this? I guess I was in that part of the retreat where it's like none of this is real or something. I don't know. I was in some other corner of my mind, even maybe, to be like, okay, I guess we're all getting up and hugging Kim now. You know?
Why?
I was like, all right, I guess if that's what we're doing. It was a weird experience for me. I was like, oh, okay.
I actually had the same thought. I was like, why are we doing it? But because Aratima said, and I guess she felt that Kim needed it to.
Right. So I was like, well, she sees something that I don't see. So I was like, I'm cool with it. But I was just aware that I was like, I have no concept of why this is actually happening.
But it was so funny that you're saying it was weird, because it was weird for me as well, because Fatima said it, and there was part of me that went, yes, I do want a hug. But it was like I was observing myself, and I was observing the victim in myself going, yes, the victim wants a hug now. And so as you came up to hug, part of me was completely detached going, this is so weird. This is really strange. Why is everyone hugging me? And the other part of me was going, yes, yes, cosset me, look after me, you know. And it was very surreal in that sense.
Mm.
Yeah.
I felt the weirdness in that too.
Yeah. And it was funny afterwards, Katya, because when I went up to see Jason and I came down and I saw you and I kind of gave you a hug, and you reacted very truthfully, and you kind of sort of looked at me like I was weird. And it's perfect, because I was aware in that moment that, again, it was the victim neediness going, oh, but everyone should be hugging me now. So I came over to give you a hug, and you very truthfully and honestly went, no, why?
I've returned from this ordeal. Everyone needs to hug me now. I could so clearly see that being a program for myself. Oh, I've had this harrowing journey through my emotions.
Now that you're saying it, I was like, did I really do that? I'm not aware of doing
No,
that.
it was perfect. It was perfect because it was so honest. It was such an honest reaction. And then after, and I was standing there being all needy, and you went, right, Kim, so you need to lose weight. And what we're going to do is we're going to do this. It was like, okay, this is tough love. This is what I need right now.
Oh my God.
I mean, of all the people to go through. It was perfect, though. It was brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. It was funny. But it's true. I think that's another important thing is, the tough love. We need the tough love sometimes, because being cosseted and, it doesn't do us any good.
Mm-hmm. There's definitely a time and a place for all of it.
Yeah. So do you guys find that letting go is easier with time and kind of knowledge, or not really? I guess it depends, doesn't it?
It's situation to situation for me, really, moment to moment. How deep am I in it already? How unconscious to it am I? Conscious or unconscious to it?
I would say it is easier because the awareness is there. You're not completely shattered, or you're not completely, I guess, unaware of what's happening. So even though the whole process feels a little bit more overwhelming in the way that, because you know what's happening, you're not pushing it away, you're really present with it. But at the same time, it is easier because you know what you're doing. Or at least you feel that you know what you're doing, or at least you're kind of aware that this is the emotion, or this is the situation, and this is where you're really stuck. And this is where the suffering is. So I would say, yes, it is. Yes and no. No, in a way that you really have to do it. You really have to drop it all off. But after that, once you drop it all off, you become so much freer, and the life is so much more beautiful.
Sometimes if the more awareness there is there, sometimes the more difficult it can be to let go of anything, because the awareness can be so clear. So you see what's happening, you know what's happening, you know it's not real, you know it's this, you can see the whole story, but then you have to experience it, and the experience of it is sometimes so opposite to the actual knowledge and awareness of it that it makes it more difficult than going through it blindly. Because sometimes when you're going through it blindly, it's like an organic process, it happens. Whereas for me, sometimes if the awareness is there and I'm clearly seeing it, knowing its story, knowing it's not real, knowing all of this stuff, but I'm physically and physiologically having to experience the emotions and experience the thoughts and the madness and the chaos and all of this, it can be hard, because you have to surrender to experiencing it. But at the same time, because you're seeing it clearly, it's like, oh my God, this again.
Yeah, I have had that come up where it's like, but I know it's not real. So why do I have to experience it? Right? Ego comes in, but I know it's not real. So why do I have to do it? And yeah, that made it harder, honestly. but then it's just letting go of that too, letting go of the belief that because you're aware of it, then you don't have to experience it.
See, sometimes when it's just like that, it's easy. You just switch your thoughts from the problem to something else, and it's really simple. I don't even see it as letting go because it just happens in the seconds, and I don't even notice that I let go of something in that moment.
Yeah, sometimes it's not like a letting go. It's more of a, oh, I suddenly seeing things differently, or a shift in perspective.
Or just change what you're thinking about. Like you said, you're like, it's like, why am I even putting my attention over here? Just move it. It doesn't even feel like a letting go because it's just so easy kind of in that way. But in the same thing, you're letting go of that thought and putting your attention elsewhere.
Yes, embracing it all the experiences that are within us.
And I think embracing the letting go or the surrender as well, not just embracing all the good, the bad, the ugly, but the process or the experience of letting go as well can be very, very beautiful and can be a gift as well, because going through life without letting go of stuff would be really difficult. But the fact that we have been taught how to do it and we practice doing it and can see the effects of doing it is great. We're lucky.
It is beautiful. Like sometimes when you go through the experience of Tantra or death, yes, it feels ugly in that moment, but there is so much beauty in it. And once you pass it, you can definitely see that beauty. And that, that bliss after you went through the experience is really beautiful.